Ladies, gentlemen, and Harajam of all ages, with the release of Diablo 4 coming up real soon, even sooner for those with early access, we've been spending a lot of time on the channel talking about what classes that you should play based on the type of gameplay you enjoy, but today is going to be a touch different, instead talking about how you should play the one that you choose, at the very least, how you should play it to begin with. As we all know, leveling in this game is essentially just the start of your journey. Most of your playtime will likely be at max level, the second largest chunk will be at level 50 and above, but the first hurdle to even getting there is what you do until level 50, the journey to that point, because realistically, that's when the game properly starts. With that said, today we are focusing on the Druid, and I'm going to give you my plan for how I'm going to be leveling my Druid when I play it, the way to most efficiently level a Druid to 50 as far as getting maximum speed out of the experience and comfortability, and getting there as quickly and easily as you can, at least in my opinion. With that said, let's break out our handy dandy build planner, and we will go over each step together so you can understand why I'm going to be making the decisions that I am. First up, for your basic skill, you're going to want Storm Strike. This is pretty much just undeniably the strongest basic skill that Druid has access to going for them, unless you are doing a specifically focused build that would benefit from one of the others. Mostly because it hits up to 4 targets if they are grouped up, it gives you 25% damage reduction when you hit with it, and if you pick the enhancements that we are going to, it also has a 15% chance to immobilize every target hit by it for 2.5 seconds, which you'll see later stacks with some other buffs that we have too. Then the big enhancement here is the 50% chance to make each enemy hit vulnerable for 3 seconds. Vulnerable is a debuff by default, simply makes an enemy take 20% more damage while it is on them. There are ways to increase this, but as a base it is 20%, and essentially that just means that overall, just from our basic skill, we are getting damage reduction, area of effect attacks that have an immobilized chance, and a high chance of applying the vulnerable debuff. Once you've got that, then we move on to our core skills, and you have a couple of choices here that can fit in with what we are doing, mostly Landslide or Tornado. Landslide is a good high damage ability, and one of its enhancements gives it the ability to apply Immobilize occasionally, but a big part of this build's functionality is actually based on crowd control, so Tornado is better for this overall for its ability to apply more consistent CC in the form of slows. The ability itself is decently strong, then with the enhancements that we've chosen, it has a 20% chance to spawn an additional Tornado every time that you use it, which is pretty great, and then additionally, also any enemy damaged by a Tornado is slowed by 8% for 3 seconds, stacking up to 40%, which is a nutty amount of slow that really lets you control large packs of enemies easily. Then we move on to our defensive skills in the build, and here you want to take Earthen Bulwark, which gives you a 3-second barrier on a 16-second cooldown that is about half the size of your health bar, letting you protect yourself from larger bursts of damage, but we also turn this into an offensive ability too with our enhancements here, the first one of which makes you unstoppable while it's active, and also we take Innate Earthen Bulwark, which makes shrapnel fire out of you when the barrier is destroyed or expires from time, which deals damage to any enemy around you, with the damage amount increasing based on any bonuses to barrier sizes that you have. From here, you will be 2 spent points short of our next section, which is a really important one, and you have 2 options here. If you are playing on World Tier 2 and finding yourself having damage intake issues, and by the way, I generally would not recommend World Tier 2 for early leveling if you're going for pure speed, then you want to put a couple of points into the Ancestral Fortitude passive. This makes it so that any damage that you take that is non-physical, which is just any type of elemental damage, is decreased by 5% per rank spent here. Otherwise, go back to the core skills and put a couple more ranks into Tornado, as that is our main damaging skill, and it's really nice to have it do more damage for obvious reasons. Then we unlock our companion skills here, and this is where we're going to be going quite hard. You want to put 1 rank into each companion, starting with Wolves, then Poison Creeper, and then over in Ravens. Then you want to put 3 ranks into the passive Call of the Wild over here, which increases the companion damage by 10% per rank up to the maximum of 30%. This affects all 3 companions that we are using in this build, so it's obviously incredibly good. Then you want the first enhancement for your wolves, which is 20% bonus damage to immobilized, stunned, slowed, or poisoned enemies, which a lot of this build is focused around as a concept. After that, you want the 2 enhancements for your Poison Creeper, which we are going for Enhanced Poison Creeper to increase the immobilized duration by 1 second, which is just, it's nice to have. And then you also want Ferocious Poison Creeper to increase the duration that the poison stays active by 3 seconds. After that, you want to get your Raven enhancements, the first one increasing your crit chance by 5% against enemies hit by ravens for 6 seconds afterwards, and the second one being Brutal Ravens to get 2 additional ravens that will periodically attack, activating the same effects, thus further increasing the active time of our crit chance increase. Then we have 1 more point to spend before reaching our next category, which is going to be 1 point in the Neurotoxin passive, which just makes poisoned enemies get slowed by 8%. Skill itself is alright, but it's more that it is a gateway to a much stronger passive.
We use it as bait.
But we'll come back to that a little bit later, as we have just unlocked the ultimate skills, which we'll be entirely ignoring except for passives, which are incredibly good for us. Essentially, your next 9 levels will be spent here in this little cluster over there. First on Defiance, which makes our nature skills deal 12% more damage to elites at max level, which helps quite a bit. Then Circle of Life, which makes our nature magic skills that consume spirit, which is specifically Tornado, heal us for 3% of our max life per cast. Then you want Resonance, which makes nature skills deal 6% more damage, which is tripled as if it is an earth skill used after a storm skill or vice versa, meaning this specifically applies in this build if you use Earthen Bulwark into Tornado for an 18% damage increase. Then we head back into the last section and put 1 point into Envenom, which makes our poisoned enemies take 10% additional critical strike damage, again boosting the effects of 2 of our companions in tandem. From here we have unlocked the key passives, of which you can only take 1, and here we'll be taking Perfect Storm, which gives you 1 spirit refund and 15% increased damage on storm skills that hit a vulnerable, immobilized, or slowed enemy. All 3 of these things we apply constantly, so this will be pretty much every storm skill that you cast, which is your basic skill, and tornadoes, which we'll be using quite a lot. From here you have all of the most important parts of this build, but we still have 24 skill points left to spend if we include the ones from Renown Gain as well, which of course we are, all of which will just be upgrading the things that we already have at this point. From here, at any point you are starting to feel pressured for survival, you should put those points into Ancestral Fortitude that I talked about earlier, but if you are feeling fine on that front and you simply don't need to put points there at all. Other than that, you want the remaining 2 points to put in Envenom for a total of 30% increased crit damage to poisoned enemies, then head back up to the core skills node and we are going to take a spree of passive. First grab 1 rank of Heart of the Wilds for 3 maximum spirit increase over here. This is simply to unlock the 2 paths that come out of it, as we want the full 3 ranks of Abundance here for a total of 18% more total spirit, then also 3 ranks of Wild Impulses, which increases the cost of our core skills by 9%, but also increases their damage by 15%. A really good trade-off, especially with the amount of spirit generation that we have now. Essentially, this is an inherent synergy between these 2 passives. You sort of just want to take them both together, and this gives you a much higher damage output from your core skills. On which note, you obviously want to fill out the ranks of our core skill Tornado up to 5. Any extra ranks of this that you can get from gear is obviously great as well. Then you want to stick a couple more points into the Wolves Companion skill just to increase the general damage, and at this point you choose between these secondary enhancements here. Again, if you're struggling with survival, you can get Ferocious Wolves for what amounts for a 5% chance to get fortified for 5% of your base life every time your wolves hit something. This is a 10% lucky hit chance. Wolves itself is a 50% lucky hit chance ability, so it has half of that value for 5%. Alternatively, again, if survival isn't an issue, you can go with Brutal Wolves, which gives your wolves a 20% increased attack speed every time you get a critical hit for just more damage overall. Then you want to fill out the ranks of Poison Creeper all the way up to 5. This is just a really strong, most consistent, largest area of effect of our companion damage, both passively and actively, and from here you have a few points remaining still. At this point you should just take Ancestral Fortitude, honestly, regardless. It is a good thing to have. It's a good damage resistance to have, because physical damage will happen. You have some good damage resistance for that, but having more damage resistance for the elemental effects is still pretty good to have anyways. From here you have 3 points left, and those can go in one of 2 places. Generally your basic skill will do a great job of applying vulnerability to enemies, but sometimes you will have so much spirit in this build going on that it is not worth hitting your basic skill anymore, which makes the Elemental Exposure passive an incredibly good choice for those 3 points that you have remaining. At max ranks it gives you a lucky hit 10% chance with storm skills to make enemies vulnerable for 3 seconds, which means anytime that you're using Tornado. Alternatively, if you don't find yourself in spirit surplus all that often, a great secondary choice would be Natural Disaster down here, which at max ranks gives your earth skills 12% increased damage against vulnerable enemies, and your storm skills 12% increased damage against enemies that are stunned, immobilized, or knocked back. If you are using your basic skill a lot, this will pay dividends. If you aren't, Elemental Exposure is definitely the way to go, so pay attention to your own gameplay at this point and decide from there really, but I do think that Elemental Exposure will generally be the way that most people will want to head here, as spirit will be in surplus a lot with the way that we built all of this. After that, we move on to talking about our spirit boons, which are the unique mechanic for the druid. You'll be picking these up along the way as well whenever you have enough spirit offerings to actually get one. You get to choose one boon to be active on each path, with the spirit bond slot letting you pick a bonus slot to be active as well. In the deer path, you pretty much just definitely want the 10% damage reduction from elites. It's just the best one in this row, especially for the way that we're playing. On the eagle path, you want the 5% increased critical strike chance. It just mixes well with what we're doing and allows us to activate our wolves more often too if you went with that skill enhancement that that I mentioned earlier. In the wolf path, you want the pack leader skill for lucky hit critical strikes, have up to a 20% chance to reset companion active skill cooldowns. This is why we put so many points into Poison Creeper. It has the strongest active ability of the 3 companions, and with us having a decently high crit chance, this will happen somewhat often, so you can hit those abilities pretty frequently. Then we use our Spirit Bond to get a second boon from the wolf, which is Energize. Lucky hit up to a 15% chance when dealing damage to restore 10 spirit. Just some lovely free spirit generation, which again lets you use your core skills way more, spam it out, do tons of damage. Then finally on the snake path, we take Overload. Lucky hit up to a 20% chance when dealing lightning damage to cause the target to drop an AoE around it, dealing 20% lightning damage as a bonus to everything that's around it. This is just the most relevant boon to our current build within this grouping. Finally then, let's talk about the legendaries and your equipment. Obviously, don't expect too many of these to drop in the early game, but if a good one does, it can completely define your build. And while some legendaries dropping could completely force you to change your build entirely if they're too good and go with the flow, these are the 3 that you could get that would actually completely enhance your power in this build, and all 3 of them you can actually unlock as permanent aspects by completing dungeons in the Dry Steppes, which is part of Act 2, so you can get them somewhere around level 30. The first one is Aspect of Bending Stone. This increases the duration of Earthen Bulwark by 6 seconds, essentially meaning that it is active for 9 seconds total. It has a cooldown of 16 seconds, so for more than 50% of the time you can have the barrier active, and on top of that, killing an enemy with Earth skills replenishes a percentage of the barrier while active, but we don't have any Earth skill damage outside of the explosion of Bulwark itself, so that part won't really be relevant. This is just a nice defensive bonus really to our defensive ability. Then we have Aspect of the Umbral, which restores 1 to 4 spirit when you crowd control an enemy, and this includes all of our Immobilize, but more importantly, the guaranteed slows that we get from poisoning with the Poison Creeper, and every slow that we get with tornadoes, which again we will just be spamming out, so every time Poison Creeper activates either passively or through your active button press, it will regenerate spirits. Every time you use tornadoes on enemies that aren't immune to crowd control, you will regenerate spirits. Then we also have the increased critical strike damage on poisoned enemies for the attacks that we use all that extra spirit for. Then finally, this is a really important one, Shepherd's Aspect. This increases the damage of your core skills by 6 to 8% for each active companion that we have. We have wolves, Poison Creeper, and ravens, which is all the companions. That means at a low roll, it is an 18% damage increase. At a high roll, it is a 24% damage increase to your tornadoes. Combine that with all of our extra spirit generation I've been talking about, and you should be throwing out tornadoes like an absolute madman if you have all of these, all with significantly increased damage too. And that's it, everyone. An incredibly strong druid leveling build for you to take advantage of here. It has loads of synergy, decent crit chance, lots of extra damage to crowd controlled enemies, and easy ways to apply crowd control. Lots of spirit generation and a lot of bonuses to our tornado as a spirit spender too. Then of course just all 3 companions active at the same time to deal loads of damage, and a little bit of defensiveness in there too, just to make sure that you can actually survive. I absolutely stand by this build on launch. I will use it on my own druid for sure, and if you were unsure how to build your druid for the early game, I completely recommend that you try this way. I hope this has helped you out in some way, shape, or form, and I cannot wait to be in the full game with you all on release. Like if you liked the video, subscribe and hit the notification bell for more, and most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, until next time, stay sweet.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.